Okay. I'm here in White Plains, New York on Saturday, the 5th of April, at the corner of Commemorating and Main Street. And can I have your name, please?
My name is Jean Fallon. I'm a Maryknoll sister.
I'm sorry, do it again. I'm sorry.
Okay. My name is Jean Fallon. I'm a Maryknoll sister.
Okay, and why are you here today?
I'm here, first of all, to join this group in protesting the war and in mourning the dead. And I've been asked to give this talk this morning as a memorial to begin the funeral march.
And what do you plan to talk about?
I plan to talk about the people who have died and all the other kinds of casualties that this war has caused.
Such as?
Such as our loss of civil rights, the different kinds of things that we have done, maybe unknowingly, that have led to this war, and also what is expected of us by those who have died.
If the rally is successful today, what's the best outcome we can hope for?
The best outcome we can hope for, well, first of all, I think we're here to show people that we are still opposed to the war, that we support our troops, but we mourn for those both who are dying of our troops, but those who are killed in this war. We as Americans can't imagine what it's like to suffer a bombing. So perhaps in this forum, people will realize that war is not a game that we watch on television or something we play, but a real, live, horrific hell for people who have to experience it. And so if we can help people understand that, that's the first step towards making our society, as an aware society, not allow this to ever happen again, that one man can take a nation and cause it to go to war. And despite the opposition of the people, opposition of the world, and despite all the other opportunities that have been offered as ways out of the war, real concrete solutions that we could have followed but didn't.
What do you think the Pope's statements in opposition to the war mean for Catholics and other people of faith?
Well, it should mean a lot. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to. There are those among the Catholic Church who follow the voice of the Pope very closely on other issues like abortion and things like that. But when it comes to war, apparently the Pope has lost his credibility or whatever, and they're not willing to follow. But the Pope is a spiritual leader. He is from Poland, where they experienced the war. So he speaks not only as somebody who is a religious and holy man, but he speaks out of experience. And most people who have experienced war are those who are trying to make us understand that what we are doing is really sinful.
A lot of it first by the Germans and then by the Russians, and I assume that was a formative experience for the Pope.
I think so.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Sort of old kind of drum, sort of like that, and the other. Two musicians for the price.
Oh, cool! Like a one-man band thing with. I did an interview. I was in the studio with an interview at Case.
Come on, boy, yeah.
Let me get the mic in. Hang on. You're fine. Okay, just that way. Can I have your name?
Lexi Nichols.
And you're involved with?
I'm involved with NION and the New Westchester Coalition of Students, What's Up, and we're trying to expand NION into a different group as well.
NION being not in our name?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so why are you here today?
To protest the war. Basically, I feel that it's important enough to go to every single thing that I can get to in order to voice myself well enough for, just add to the numbers. And I feel that it's incredibly important, and anything that I see that I can actually physically attend, I will do so, if it's in my power, and everyone should.
Why are you opposed to the war?
Opposed to the war? The war is not only unjust, it is demoralizing, it is a symbol of America's failure and imperialism in other countries. It's a symbol of the deterioration of a nation under a fascist government, and I feel that it should be opposed as much as possible.
You refer to a fascist government. What do you mean by that?
Okay, so our government controls every opportunity that it gets. It controls countries that are not only third world, but are also, evolving, because we don't want any competition in this world. We want to be an empire, and the government is completely endorsing the control of their own civilians. Not only minorities. It's starting to work its way up into the regular, even middle class. And not only is Bush instating police states in our nation, but he's also endorsing our imperialism in other countries, and that's how we're fascist.
Okay, so if today's successful, what do you think is the best outcome we can hope for out of this rally?
Best outcome meaning what?
Out of this rally, if it's successful, what impact does it have?
I think the best impact would be to open people's eyes in the media, and as we can see, people are watching. We've got media here today, and it's in White Plains. There's traffic. People see us. That's what we need to do. We need to be seen, be heard, and best outcome is that we open some eyes.
Okay, the flowers you have, what do they symbolize? Let's see if we can get a shot of that. Yeah, there we go.
Well, I just bought these flowers at the dollar store because I needed something to throw on the coffin for the Iraqi children and innocent civilians who are dying right now.
Move in this direction.
And then they prepared people. They put marching. They were telling them marching. And then they would go that way. And so, one side.
If you don't have a sign yet, we have plenty back here.
Yeah, I was I'll be misrepresenting myself. Well, you're a veteran. Yeah, but it's Vietnam.
You'll probably find it a little easier to see and hear if you're down there.
You said, do you want to have a meeting? Yes. And I said, yeah. I said, okay. I said, next week, I guess.
Hello, everybody.
He didn't hear you.
Okay, everybody try and get into the park so we
Well,
can
you know, if you don't want to have a meeting.
focus on what we need to
They wanted
focus
to
on.
stay for this meeting. I told them, I said,
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Try to be as quiet as you possibly can. Try to move as quickly as you can to wherever you're going to stop so that big funeral, I don't think it's a mock funeral. I think this is a funeral. And we may not have actual dead bodies here, but most of the funerals for the September 11 victims didn't either, nor will the funerals for many of the Iraqis who have died and are going to continue to die. And we may not be the family members, but in a war, the victims don't necessarily get funerals given by families.
Can't miss it because once you get there, there's 4 lanes this side, there's a car, there's 4 lanes on the other side.
Hey, how are you?
Hi. You with
Yeah,
Archer?
with these guys. Yes, I am. I'm also covering it for BAI.
Gotcha. All right. Just walking by? Yeah. You have any opinion about what they're doing?
What's up? How are you?
But I wouldn't mind if I had a daughter. I'll take a
Can I get a picture of you guys? I want to do an article in my school about. Ready? Hold up your sign.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Just really steep. I rounded off one big.
Oh, okay, so we're correct. So
Yeah.
Good, all right. I don't have to count it again then. We did it right.
possible terrorism, greater terrorism, and basically bankrupt this community here. And I think that it's like the best
Everybody here, I'm real glad to see both American flags here and Earth flags and UN flags, because I'm real happy that people on both sides of this war really care about this country. But I don't see any Earth flags in the windows, I don't see Earth flags in those cars, I don't see any symbol that speaks to the concern of the world. This is all about the country. And our country has no higher authority than us, and we have the ability to destroy the world 30 times over. We really need those symbols. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I want to introduce our next speaker. You can't hear me? How about now? Can everybody hear me? I won't repeat what I just said. Wasn't that important anyway? Okay. Just before I introduce our next speaker, our next speaker is Ben Chitty with Vietnam Veterans for Peace. Everybody come closer. That way we'll be able to hear better, okay? Because you really want to hear Ben Chitty speak. Very good speaker. Okay.
Jeez, I didn't know I was such a good speaker. My name is Ben Chitty. I'm a member of the Tappan Zee Brigade of Veterans for Peace and the Clarence Fitch chapter of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I served in the United States Navy from 1965 to 1969 and deployed twice to Vietnam. I want to talk here a little bit about patriotism. Before the shooting started, we could talk about whether we should go to war. But now that we are at war, wait a minute. Testing, 1, 2, testing. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Just be real close. Before the shooting started, we could talk about whether we should go to war, but now that we are at war, we're supposed to sit down, shut up, support our soldiers, support their commander-in-chief. And whenever the president announces a glorious victory, we can welcome the troops home and applaud the president. Congratulations all around for a job well done. Is that right? Wrong. Some troops have already come back in coffins and more will. A lot of the troops won't be coming home anytime soon, and the president's policy was wrong from the beginning. The victory, however inevitable, can't make it right, and the devastation of a nation is no cause for celebration. Now, it's real easy to confuse a commander with his troops, to confuse the political policies which send soldiers into combat with the soldiers themselves. Politicians and the media's paid military experts all tell us that the troops must have absolute confidence in their leaders, in the commander-in-chief and his adjutants and generals, for his policies to work as planned to bring the war to a quick and successful conclusion. They tell us the shock of combat and the sacrifice of war are best endured by soldiers who know their mission is supported by their families and communities. Both these things are half true, but we know better. We've been there and we've come back. Why do soldiers fight? Generals may command to earn glory or at least a promotion from a grateful government. Some even aspire to achieve military missions at minimal human and material cost. Pilots may fly for the sheer challenge and excitement of it all. But the soldiers, Marines, and seamen aground and afloat, they fight for each other. This is a very practical decision. You need your buddy to back you, so you back him or her. It means that you ignore some things which may have seemed important back in the world, the color of your skin, the language you speak, where you come from, who you love. But this intense loyalty, which does get you through combat, can change the way you think. Changes the way you think about people who profit from war, about generals who shroud their mistakes with top-secret classifications, about politicians who use your blood and your tears to re-elect themselves and then leave you to rot. You learn that life is so fragile, so easily destroyed, that taking or losing it has got to mean something. When you look at flag-draped coffins, when you visit the injured and the maimed on hospital wards, when you listen to families grieving over their dead, you want to know what this is for. When you see the devastation which follows in the wake of war, you want to understand why. Deep down in your bones, you really want to know why this happens and what it's for. Every soldier, every family member waiting at home wants to have confidence in the Commander-in-Chief. But this confidence is earned, not just requisitioned or purchased or commanded by executive or general order. How about this Commander-in-Chief? In response to the terror of September 11, 2001, George W. Bush promised us a long and eventually successful war to make the nation safe from such attacks. He reinforced alliances with old allies like Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Turkey, and Israel, none of democracies. All of them engaged in the repression of oppressed populations in Central Asia. He sent troops into Afghanistan, though the Afghans themselves did most of the fighting, and installed a puppet regime, but failed to apprehend the men accused of commanding the September 11th attacks. He dispatched troops to the Philippines, to Yemen, to Georgia, to Colombia. Then he turned his attention to Iraq. Why? Not because of any connection to September 11th. Not because Iraq had suddenly become a threat to the United States. Not because Saddam Hussein had suddenly become a bloody tyrant. And not because the United States had received any mandate from the United Nations or even world opinion. In fact, the reasons keep changing from month to month, sometimes from day to day and hour to hour. At this moment, Operation Iraqi Freedom is supposed to bring liberty, justice, and democracy to the Shiite Arab, Sunni Arab, Kurdish, Assyrian, Turkoman, and other peoples of ancient Mesopotamia. And in fact, at the moment, the United States and its alleged allies never dared to bring the question of regime change in Iraq to a vote in the United Nations Security Council. But still, this president dreams that somehow the destruction of Saddam Hussein will bring stability, peace, and justice to the Middle East. Even his conduct of the war has been a little flaky. He orchestrated new weapons inspections, then abandoned them as they were beginning to show results. He began the war with a quick decapitation strike on the Iraqi leadership in Baghdad, with targets selected by the latest intelligence and the latest of a long line of intelligence failures. He continued with rapid advances deep into Iraqi territory, expecting, based again on the latest intelligence, a wave of insurrection and liberation to follow the tanks to Baghdad. Instead, he got pockets of resistance along the supply line, attacks by irregular soldiers, and little enthusiasm among the Iraqis for the infidel invaders. He prepared for a long and bloody ground war inside Baghdad against an enemy armed with chemical and biological weapons, which he still can't find, and he promises the troops won't stay long in the Middle East. You could read his lips on this. The president's new and endless war has other foreign fronts. While we watched Iraq, American soldiers died in Afghanistan. An American missionary was killed in the Philippines. American mercenaries were killed and captured in Colombia. Meanwhile, the American anthrax terrorist remains free. India and Pakistan threaten each other with nuclear weapons. North Korea tests missiles capable of delivering its own nuclear bombs. Ex-Soviet nuclear arms depots remain poorly protected and even more poorly controlled, and resentment and resistance continue to fester around Israel's illegal occupation and confiscation of Palestinian land. This endless war also has a domestic front. Already before the attacks of September 11th, the president acted like his second finish in the year 2000, gave him a mandate to degrade environmental protection, cut taxes on the rich, appoint federal judges committed to criminalizing a woman's right to choose. Now that Osama bin Laden has given him the mandate the American people would not give him, he moves to protect freedom by restricting civil liberties, especially for immigrants, and to expand civil rights by abandoning affirmative action. He moves to invigorate the economy by ballooning the federal deficit and cutting taxes for the rich again. He moves to enhance our security by stripping away the right to organize from many federal workers and providing more federal aid per capita for counterterrorism to places at high risk like Idaho, Arkansas, and Florida than to New York, New Jersey, and California. And as we stand here in range of Indian Point, do we feel safer? What's missing here is accountability. And we've been missing accountability for a long time. Lyndon Johnson didn't have the balls to stop the war in Vietnam and instead went home to his ranch in Texas. Richard Nixon was allowed to resign without impeachment for the good of the country, so they say. Ronald Reagan never admitted invading Grenada to save medical students who were in no danger, never admitted bombing Libya in retaliation for Syrian terrorism, never admitted mining the harbors of Nicaragua, never admitted sponsoring Uniton butchers in Angola, never admitted subverting congressional authority and the Constitution in Iran-Contra. George Bush I pardoned the Iran-Contra conspirators and stonewalled the question of collateral civilian casualties in Panama. Bill Clinton ordered a missile strike on a chemical factory in Sudan which killed a night watchman based on mom intelligence, and I never heard that anyone paid for that crime of homicide by depraved indifference. The two things that are wrong with applauding the Commander-in-Chief for the accomplishments of the troops. First, the men and women who risk their lives and the families who wait for them, they are the ones who decide what their blood and tears are worth. The mother who buries the fragments of a child, the soldier who holds a buddy screaming out of his mind with pain, they are the ones who decide, not the president exulting in his sense of divine mission, not the vice president now more than ever willing to let others die defending his interests, and certainly not the Congress cheering for an American victory over a country the size of California with the population of New York State and the economy of Mississippi. The people who pay the price, they're the ones who decide. And second, we should be careful what we ask of our soldiers. Everyone agrees that we can't repeat our country's betrayal of Vietnam veterans, but what exactly was this betrayal? Sure, returning soldiers sometimes clashed with anti-war demonstrators. Of course, soldiers in country could read about the peace marches. Sometimes we cursed them. Sometimes we laughed at them. Often we hoped they worked. But President Richard Nixon told the Veterans Administration to stop readjustment programs for returning combat veterans. President Gerald Ford and the next three presidents refused to recognize the governments of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, which delayed our accounting for our missing in action for more than 20 years, which still obstructs our study of the health effects of exposure to Agent Orange. President Jimmy Carter excluded veterans from his amnesty. President Ronald Reagan sabotaged the Agent Orange study mandated and funded by Congress. President George Bush I simultaneously recognized one legacy of the American experience in Vietnam by finally allowing the National Academy of Sciences to investigate the effects of exposure to Agent Orange. It immediately nullified that lesson by allowing the Pentagon to stonewall on evidence for the exposure of soldiers in Desert Shield and Desert Storm to experimental vaccines, chemical toxins, and radiological hazards, which over the next decade produced almost 200,000 disabled veterans, several thousand of them already dead. Still, these puny, vindictive, and contemptible acts were not the heart of our government's betrayal of veterans. Every president says it is our patriotic duty to support the troops by supporting him as Commander-in-Chief, and Congress always agrees. That's exactly how this country really betrayed Vietnam veterans. Thousands of us died so Lyndon Johnson could avoid becoming the first American president to lose a war. Richard Nixon devastated 3 nations, slaughtered more than 1 million Indo-Chinese, and sent 27,000 American soldiers to their deaths while he negotiated for peace with honor. He turned out to be the greatest traitor of them all. We learned the deadly folly of confusing our welfare with the policies of our commanders-in-chiefs in the jungles and highlands, the villas and paddies along the riverbanks of Vietnam. Now another president has sent a new generation of soldiers enlisted by false promises and conscripted by economic necessity to fight for what he calls freedom. After the first Bush war in the Gulf, that President Bush declared that we could forget about Vietnam now. The Vietnam syndrome was finally cured. But he spoke out of ignorance and vanity. We understand the original Vietnam syndrome. The original Vietnam syndrome was the presidential delusion that American military force could impose peace anywhere in the world with no concern for justice. And George W. Bush is repeating his father's mistake. Instead of curing Americans of some Vietnam syndrome, he's reinfecting himself. Now, we cannot just let that fever run its course. That's too dangerous for the world, too dangerous for us here. If we really want to cure this Vietnam syndrome, we have to call our president to account for his actions. Now, I don't know what you call these actions. High crimes and misdemeanors comes to my mind. Now, we can begin by telling our political representatives what they must do to represent our interests in Westchester County, in Albany, and in Washington, D.C. We can tell them what they have to do to keep their jobs. They work for us. If they won't do the job, we'll find someone who will. We can do better. And we can begin this task here. We can begin this task right now. Now, I've come many miles over long years, all the way from Vietnam, to tell you this. And I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Okay, one more hand for Ben Chitty. Okay, the funeral portion of the demonstration is over. And I know you can't just switch it off like that, which is why we have our next set of speakers. But before I introduce them, please, I'd like to...
What's been going on in the United States imperial policy by Ben Chitty. So once again, for me personally, Ben, thank you for instructing us, for somebody who's been there and experienced the ravages of United States imperial policy. Now, it's a very ugly day out here today, but I feel it's very, very fitting, because this is a very dark day for the United States, and a very darker day for the whole world, as the United States feels free to do whatever it wants, wherever it pleases. This new unipolar world that we live in is definitely frightening. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think the government in Washington at least felt the requirement to make some kind of pretenses that it cared even for its own people, because we had something to be compared against. But since the collapse of the Soviet Union, the United States really feels free to do whatever it wants, wherever it wants, hurt people throughout the globe and here at home. As Ben mentioned, the examples are so many. You don't need them here today. You don't need me to re-recite them. You've heard them. You read about them. We live in a time right now that people are very, very fearful. Fearful on many levels, too. And you, the people who are here, are the lights. You're the light against this darkness, who are not afraid, who are not going to be cowed into silence, who come out here today in the rain, in the cold, in the freezing, to say, no, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to challenge. That is my democratic right. That is my democratic responsibility. And we each have responsibilities. Not only to come to a demonstration here, not only come to our weekly vigils, but to challenge the power morning, noon, and night. The power that pretends to act in our name, but we know whose name it acts in. The Enrons, the Globalcon, the Global Crossings, the real people who run this country, the secret cabal. As Arundhati Roy said that at the World Social Forum, the United States has a secret history, mostly secret from its own people, because the people of the world know what United States history is about, what its policies mean. Increasing poverty, increasing suffering, increasing death and destruction. There's a lot of pressure on each and every one of you not to come out today, not to speak your mind. You're meant to feel cowed. Oh no, if you come out, you're not patriotic, you do not support the troops. Ben Chitty, I think, took that argument apart. But still, there's a lot of pressure on each and every one of us, in our neighborhoods, in our schools, in our workplaces, to remain silent. But as a sign there says, peace is patriotic. If we believe in the true ideals of this country, this is our responsibility. And to take it to the next step, and to the step after that. Sister mentioned earlier Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the evil that was done there. We're approaching those levels again. And I personally don't believe the real targets of those atomic bombs were just the civilians of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were for the Soviet Union, to let them know, don't dare mess with the United States. And I believe the invasion and the illegal attack on Iraq is not so much meant for the people of Iraq. It's meant for a possible united economic European Union, for Russia, who still has numerous nuclear weapons, and for the growing threat of China, It's a message to each and every one of those potential adversaries. Back off. We do what we want, and you'll pay a dear price if you ever think of challenging us. We have to go home and watch on TV the General Half-Tracks and the Colonel Clinks talking about this adulation, this love affair with weapons of destruction, documents of death. Is this what we're about? Will any one of the people in the media challenge them on the very legality of this whole monstrosity?
No.
This adoration, this adulation of death in our culture. At the same time, we remove all the services that are trying to make this a livable world. Each and every one of us, we do a lot. Each and every one of you out there has done a lot, but there's more you can do. Oh, yeah. As Ray mentioned, sign up, get more involved. Chuck Bell is going to be passing out a sheet of different things you can do. We want to have teach-ins in every one of the communities. Challenge the warmongers. Challenge the people who yell at us from outside. Let them speak up. Let's engage those people. In the Progressive Populist this week, Ted Lyle had a column called The Moron Majority. Not the moral, but the moron majority. Maybe the educational policy is really doing what it's can. Because now 51% of United States citizens believe that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11. We have tremendous, tremendous work to do. We are the peacemakers. Come on. We are the people who are doing what we're supposed to do. We are challenging injustice at every step of the way. But we've got work to do educating people. Letting people know day in, day out that we're being lied to. The liar Bush, the liar Rumsfeld, the liar Cheney, the liar Powell, the liar Rice. Challenge them. Don't let them get a free ride like they do with the media. Yeah. Challenge them every step of the way. These are liars, and we will not be governed by lies. We will not be motivated by fear. We will not be governed by injustice. Challenge the lies. Don't be afraid to be called to account on it by anybody. We know what the truth is. Right. And we will help find the truth if we don't know everything. Noam Chomsky talks about destroying that whole line about, speak truth to power. We don't have to speak truth to power. Power knows the truth. George Bush and his cabal knows the truth. They want to control the world. They want to control the resources. They want to deny everybody a right to free and access of their access to those resources. They know what the power is. We have to educate people about how that power works and how to challenge that power. Today is the first step, those of you who've come here today. We are challenging that power, and we will continue to challenge that power day in, day out, morning, noon, and night. Everybody we meet, we're going to challenge that power. We are not going to let them get away with taking our democratic rights and taking the true purpose and the principles of this country and tearing them asunder. Especially we know what the damage is. We see the people being brought back in boxes. This is not our country. This is not our principles. Our principles is in a peaceful world, a just world, where people can live in peace and dignity and have access to resources. There's a saying when you go down to the demonstrations, how did their sand get over our oil? We do not have claim to every resource on this